America's history with nuclear power has had its ups and downs, but has global warming now changed the equation?
In our continuing series of reports on Maine's changing climate, we asked meteorologist Keith Carson to look at that question. Keith, what'd you find out?
Well, guys, the reality is whether it's solar or wind or hydropower, the transition to greener energy sources tends to be complicated. But there's a gray area here. What about nuclear power? Scientists have known for decades that increased CO2 in the atmosphere is leading to rapid warming of the planet. And with that knowledge, there has been, in general, a push to switch from fossil fuels to more renewable sources of energy, such as wind, solar, and hydro. But there's an internal debate among scientists. Should nuclear energy be included in our green energy plan? Or more specifically, is more nuclear needed to bridge the gap between fossil fuels and a fully reliable, renewable grid?
We believe that at least existing nuclear power plants could play an important near-term role in addressing climate change as we accelerate the ramp up of wind and solar to replace coal and natural gas. And those fossil fuels, coal and gas, provide about 60% of the country's electricity currently. So we have a big task in front of us just to get rid of those sources to decarbonize the power sector. Nuclear power provides about 20% of the country's electricity and about half of the country's zero carbon electricity. So if we retire existing nuclear power plants before their licenses expire, that could result in an increase in fossil fuel use and emissions and make it much more difficult to achieve our climate goals.
It's important to grasp the amount of power nuclear plants can deliver, and with a very low carbon footprint. For example, one 1,000 megawatt nuclear plant produces roughly the same amount of electricity in its 60-year lifespan as 2,000 wind turbines over their lifetime. That's a big number. So why is nuclear output all but stalled in the United States? As with most things, it's all about the Benjamins.
Because some plants anyways, not all plants, have been losing money. And one of the biggest risks was low natural gas prices, which, as you know, but in the last year or two, especially with the result of the war in Ukraine, natural gas and oil prices have gone up. So that has made nuclear power plants more profitable because they can sell their power into the market and make more money when electricity prices are higher. But prior to that, natural gas prices were at historic lows for a number of years, mostly because of the fracking boom in the United States, lowered gas prices. And so that made it difficult for some nuclear power plants to compete.
Even if fossil fuel commodities stay elevated in price, leveling the playing field on cost, is building new nuclear power plants feasible? Consider that currently there are only 2 nuclear power plants being built in the United States, with more scheduled to be retired than built in the next 10 years. Speaking of years, that's part of the problem. A nuclear plant typically takes 10 to 15 years to construct from planning to operation. Given the pressing need to decarbonize quickly, that might be too slow. And then, of course, there's the issue of location, location, location. Will Americans be in a hurry to have a new nuclear plant built in their backyard?
I think siting of public assets, be they wind turbines or nuclear plants or wastewater treatment plants, all these things that they may be privately owned or publicly owned, but they serve a public good in some sense. Those are really challenging things. And I don't know if it's possible to site a new one.
So existing nuclear power plants likely have a role in our transition from fossil fuels to renewables, but it's far from the silver bullet. Of course, our area has its own history with nuclear power. The Seabrook nuclear plant in New Hampshire, which went online in 1990, is still running. And 3 years ago, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission extended the plant's operating license to 2050. Then there's Maine Yankee in Wiscasset, which was decommissioned in 1996 after so many problems were found during inspection that it would have cost too much money to fix. It was torn down a few years later. But the nuclear waste that it generated is still on site, stored in concrete casts. And last but not least, nuclear energy isn't especially popular. Although 35% of Americans say the government should encourage more nuclear power, 49% of Americans also view nuclear energy unfavorably, making siting new plants difficult, to say the least. And guys, the fear factor here is a big part of nuclear's uphill battle if it wants to be a bigger part of our energy budget.